The Venus Project, TeamSpeak Seminar, July 15th, 2012.
I want to talk a little bit about robots and human behavior. The major difference between cybernetic organisms and human systems. A lot of people think that programming is exactly the same in people and robotics. It is not. The major difference is that you can design a robot to walk over, pick up an object, put it in another place. But the robot, before it even moves, if you put the object in the place the robot was going to put it in, it would still walk over and grab nothing in particular. That's programmed. The difference between human systems and robots, it's not linear. That means that the robot can do certain things that you program into it. And if you look at that under a microscope, you can see magnetic domains that'll make the robot walk over to a given area and sit in a chair. If you pull the chair away, the robot will walk over and sit on nothing and fall over. That's programmed. The human system differs considerably. When you work on a human being, let's put it this way, or a chimpanzee, or any animal. I'll work with the chimp this time. I'll have put the chimp in a box, a big box, and in that box are rods sticking out different lengths with a cue, a circle, triangle on one of them, different patterns. And you don't have to teach it anything. It'll walk in and sooner or later it'll touch those things. When it touches any one of them, water will come forth. Touches another one, food. Touches another one, a soft bed comes out of the wall. If the animal is put there for a long enough time, it will use those rods appropriately. Any animal has a range of behavior. When put in an environment, it doesn't respond like a robot. It looks at the environment and seeks reinforcement, food. If the leaves are circular where the food is, it'll go to the circular leaves. That's called associative memory. Programmed computers have no associative memory. They follow a pattern. So if you look at a phonograph record with a microscope, you'll see zigzags cut in the record. Those zigzags are representation of the voice of a person. While the record is playing, if it's somebody singing Caruso or somebody else, can't deviate from those patterns. Robots that are programmed can't deviate from those programs unless you have a path alongside of it and you show variations, and instead of a circle, slight ellipse. The animal will touch that thing thinking it's a circle because they're not that critical, and it gets burnt slightly. So it will never touch that one again. That's what the animal has that the robot doesn't have. If the robot touches something and it doesn't reinforce it, how do you reinforce a robot? If he gets stung, that wouldn't bother him at all. But a robot can learn to respond to different figures. When he sees a triangle, presses a button, he gets lubricated. But he doesn't feel good when he gets lubricated. So there's no reason to retain that action. It's only when a human touches something and they feel good touching it that they repeat it. A robot cannot touch something and say, hey, that feels good. They can reach out, do that, and pull back, but they can't make anything of it. Do you understand that? The reason I say, do you understand that, is because there's so much conflict today about robots and people. Will robots take over? Not if they're programmed not to take over. If they're programmed to take over, they can only shoot a guy in a certain uniform. And if the guy stays put in a given area, the robot can walk over. Unless you condition a robot through the eyes to follow anything that moves and shoot it. Is a robot an assassin? No. It's programmed to shoot. That's quite different. Human beings have, some people believe, 10 to 15 billion neurons. A robot has hundreds of thousands of associates, not billions. So if you learn that a cup gives you water Anything that looks like a cup might support water. We can deviate from our programming. Our programming appears rigid, but alongside of it is associative memory. That I touched that and I felt pain. I touched the other thing and I didn't feel pain. I got something. The robot never looks at a thing and says, that's interesting. If you were to float midair in front of a robot with a, hey, now that is interesting. It can't do that. It can only do what it's programmed to do. A man can see things and be programmed and compare it to something else. That's a major difference between programmed behavior and human programming. Humans have a lot of associations prior to programming. So the other associations, if it reminds him of the other, he can deviate. That's why people walk out of here when I speak with different interpretations.
Kurzweil talks about implanting, when nanotechnology comes about, implanting something in the head, like a second brain that may be so fast that it could take over the other brain in the person. This is something he's raised.
Well, you can do that, but it's not. It doesn't give them leverage like, I wonder about that. I've never seen that happen. A man could say that. A man could look at an event and say, that's strange the way that paper holds up that speaker. A robot does not do that. It looks at the speaker. It doesn't even look at it and say, that looks like a speaker. Unless you put a speaker in front of the robot and say, that's a speaker. So when the eye sees it, it says, that's a speaker. When you turn it sideways, it doesn't know what that is. When you turn it sideways and say, that's also a speaker, if you rotate a speaker in many positions, so the robot has associations with the shape in different positions, you can call it a speaker. But if it'll call an orange, but if you cut it in half, it can't call it an orange. It doesn't say it looks like half an orange. But do you understand that? Okay.
This thing that Kurzweil is putting out, like the singularity, is when you start to implant things in people's heads that have so many more calculating ability. Or
if it is not connected to the other neurons, it won't do anything.
It couldn't take over.
No, unless it's connected.
Well, he's proposing that it is connected somehow, that there is some interface between...
If there is an interface, organic neurons respond to a certain rate of speed. Anything beyond that rate, it can't respond. Electronic systems travel almost at the speed of light. Neural associations are relatively slow. So if you try to speed up digestion of food in a human, digestive acids flow at a certain rate. If you were to triple the rate, it might digest portions of the intestines. You can take a bear, for example, let's take a bear and put it in a room this size with a bunch of objects sticking out. They have to stick out, 40 of them. A bear might learn how to use 12 of them, but not 40. It won't remember 40. It doesn't have the neuronal amount to remember. Well, a bear could remember, because when a bear walks through an environment, this bush has berries, and he remembers where the bush is. This area has animals that I can eat. A bear can build up maybe thousands of associations. But first you have to study the range of the animal. How many levers an animal can remember will tell you what its outside response will be. You find a bear can learn to work 47 levers, and beyond that, a little beyond that or a little less, if that's true. Then you know what the bear can respond to in the environment. 40 different systems. A human can generate associations with thousands of things in the environment. If a human learns to eat certain food, and he has to climb a tree to get it, if you put that food at the base of the tree, he won't climb the tree. A robot will. Do you understand that? If you program a robot to climb a tree to get the apple, it'll do that. But if you put the apple on the ground or over the that simplifies things. No, unless you build in something special in the robot to handle unforeseen variables. And that's what people don't know how to do yet. They don't know how to program a robot to say, what have we here? Because a robot, the word, what have we here, doesn't mean anything to a robot. It means something to a human being.
The roboticists and Kurzweiler, too, are bringing up, when the robot does become connected to the environment and does have enough information that it would surpass people and overtake people.
A robot does not ask questions. A robot does not say, I've been here before, I've seen that before. They don't have enough neurons to build all kinds of associations.
Do you think it's possible that they can do that if they use biological?
Well, if it's programmed, no. But if a robot is self-programming, then the reason for a robot's actions are very different than human systems. When human puts something to his mouth, it tastes good. When a robot does nothing, there's no reward. Now, what's a reward to a robot? Sitting down, does it say, I'm so tired, and now I feel better. He doesn't feel. So when he sits down, he doesn't say, it's good to have a chair in my area. He doesn't give a shit about those things. If the light gets so bright that the eyes of the robot turn off, he says, I can't see, if you wire him that way. But he doesn't turn down the light unless you wire it that way. Then he turns down the light when it gets bright, but not because it's bright, because he has senses that turn off the light.
You were explaining last night this in terms of humans have to have experience to
that means a robot doesn't seek experience. A robot doesn't want to know why some tires wear out faster than others. So he doesn't take a microscope and looks at the rubber under a microscope. A robot is not equipped that way. They don't have pleasure and pain. If they had pleasure and pain, if they did, they would have preferences. Do you understand? If a robot cuts wood with a rotary saw, all the wood is shoved in there, automatically cuts it. If you put a human there, he'll cut it too. He doesn't say, just a minute, that's a person. I don't want to cut that. The robot cannot do anything unless it's programmed to do it. And it could be programmed to cut wood, but it'll cut anything else shoved in there. If you interfere with its programming, it doesn't say, hey, now wait a while, you're interfering with program. If radar picks up fog in San Francisco, the airplane might fly above the weather. The airplane moves up based on what's out there. If it's fog, it moves up. But it doesn't move up to avoid the fog. That's human projection. The robot moves up because there was fog ahead. Its senses bounce back and give it a thing that controls the elevators and makes it move up. If it's raining, the robot may open an umbrella above itself. But when the raindrops hit the umbrella, they make contact with two terminals. So that flows across, that opens the umbrella. But the robot says, it's raining, I'm going to get wet, I open. No, none of that. I'm talking about robotics today. You can only say why the robots won't take on over today with what we know about robotics. But if they find a new system, I don't know about that, so I can't talk about it. If you can give machines feelings, I don't see how you do that with steel robotics. I can't see where a machine said to another machine, that was a nice thing you did, helping the old lady across the street, because that's a value system. I might help anybody across the street that's having difficulty, not necessarily an old lady. But an old lady, you make a lot of assumptions. You see it as your mother or your grandmother, you help across the street. But if your grandmother was the biggest pain in the ass you ever met, you'd never help an old lady across the street. Do you understand that? Okay. So you say, what's the matter with that guy? I wouldn't help the old lady. Nothing's the matter with anybody. They all reflect their background. So when people say, do you think the robots will take over? There's no basis for it if they're programmed a certain way. They can't be programmed to take over.
Do you see any scenario where they will surpass people?
Yes, if you make organic people. Do you know what that means with feelings? If a guy eats something that's hot, he holds it away, and then he has to have enough neurons or enough electrical circuits to remember that when steam is coming out of a cup it's too hot to put in your mouth. You have to build in equipment to receive that information, and that is not well understood today.
But you talk about something from outer space comes here, they wouldn't be humanoid.
That's right. They
So do you
wouldn't
think...
care. They wouldn't want to talk to anybody. I want to say this about human beings. With all their neurons, they still will crowd maybe hundreds of thousands of people to see the king and queen. They will go places and wait all day, even if it's raining a little. They want to see the queen. Now, the queen can never utter stuff that would be beneficial to them. The king can never say, by the way, if you turn your car this way, you get more miles per gallon. The king can never say anything of use. Yet these people gather to see a movie star, or they'll gather to see somebody or want their autograph, which is a nothing thing. It just means that you've made contact with somebody. So people will crowd to see a baseball player, which can never say anything that will enhance their lives. Unless a kid says to the baseball player, how can I become good? Practice. Lots of practice. Okay? And the kid can never hit the basket, then tell him to go to a neurologist, see if his nervous system is working properly. Man can do that. But no computer turns to another computer and says, what is your range of sensitivity? If you could do that to a computer and say, I can sense water falling, I can sense a ball falling, but if you move it too fast, my senses can only pick up 17 images per second. So if I met a robot, I would check its range, then I know what it can do. How do you check its range? You put them in an environment and see how fast it makes adjustments for everything in that environment. Yes.
Do you think that robotics in some form, like you say, how they may come here, they'd be very different in some form, they could be the next step in evolution and surpass humans?
They will be the next step ever, but they have no reason to reproduce themselves as a robot. A man wants a family. He has an orgasm and that produces a person. He doesn't have sex to reproduce, although some people think they do. If sex were not pleasurable, animals would not reproduce. Animals don't know that having sex will produce offspring. They can't know that, yes.
So what is a human in a mechanistic sense?
A human has lots of range. If it didn't, it wouldn't exist. If you don't have the range to know that lava will burn you and kill you, and if there's a lava flow and you grin and sit there, your species is gone. But if you react to heat, if you have heat sensors in your fingers, you go away. They say, well, the man didn't want to get burnt, that's why he went away. No, he had heat sensors, and that made him back away. That's what I mean by mechanistic. If I say he backed away because he didn't want to be burnt, the kid drew his hand out of the fire because it hurt. That's true. But if the kid had no nerves, no heat sensors, the hand would remain on the fire and begin to smoke, and he'd grin. Okay. So when I say human beings are responding organisms, so's a robot, but they're responding to a track. The human is responding to his background and his programming. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah.
Yes, physiology and his programming. A human being, a robot, will climb a hill no matter how high it is, and they'll wear out climbing there. A human being will go up 150 feet and say, boy, I got to sit down and rest a while. See, because he can feel fatigue. A robot can't. Yes.
So you don't believe that it is possible to create a synthetic organism with such complexity that it could actually feel?
Yes, we could. But right now, the kind of organisms we have do not feel. They'd have to have long experience.
So what does it mean to feel?
What it means to feel, if the robot put lubricating oil and it felt good, just like you feel good when you eat. If you don't eat, you're hungry, you got no food. When you put something to your mouth, you tend to chew on it. Kids suck any part of the body, and when they get to the breast, they get milk. Now, why do men have breasts if there's purpose to everything? They don't feed the young. But they found out on certain islands, when men nurse babies, they eventually produce milk. Did you know that? Okay. That's interesting. Man is very different than a program. A program is a record turning with magnetic differences, and all the robot does is follow that programming. The robot cannot turn off unless the circuit breaks, unless you cut the wires. But a robot might even say, welcome to this house, have a seat. But if you stand and the robot's not programmed to say, I said have a seat, if you don't move to that direction. You can program the robot to say have a seat, but the robot doesn't feel good whether you're sitting or standing. It has no reason to perpetuate that action. But if you can give a robot feelings of some kind, or the equivalent of feelings, which is very hard to do without organic matter. It's organic senses that have pain. A dog, if it goes up to a guy that offers the food and bites the dog will not go back. If you hold lubricating oil before a robot, it doesn't give a shit. It doesn't come up and say, I need lubrication. It can't, unless it's programmed to do so. If it's programmed to stick its hand out and then the lubricant is injected into it, it doesn't go there for lubrication. It goes there as a response to a certain shape, visual. Yes.
So can you make a robot with what they call an instinct for survival, per se?
Well, you can simulate a robot when ice particles, big ice chunks, are falling from the skies. He can go like that, or he can pick up a stainless steel umbrella to prevent that from hitting him, but not for prevention of injury. The robot doesn't say, I did this because I don't want to be injured. I can make him say that when this thing is falling. You say, why did you open the umbrella? He says, I opened it because I didn't want to be injured. That's not true. That's a human pathway put in the brain.
Is it possible to create a robot with what you would term a consciousness or a sense of self?
No, we can only simulate it, only if it's organic. A bear will not lie on a bunch of spikes sticking up, even though he's never encountered it. The spike sticking up to the bear, through associative memory, means pain. So he looks for soft grass. They say dogs turn around before they lie down. That's true, they do. They do turn around. But the people that study animal behavior they honestly believe that the dog, over years of sitting in the grass, turned around to level the grass before they sat down. They can't inherit that. The dog, if he turned around, so I interrupted dogs just before they sit down. After they turn around about to, I make a noise, and they turn around again, make a noise. I interrupted. Do you know, to see if the dog would just sit down anyway? No. And sometimes you call the dog over and then you chase it away. Then if you do that 4 or 5 times, it doesn't come to you when you call them. That's associative memory based on feelings, rejection, or whatever it may be to a dog. And so if a robot got up one morning and said, the bed I was sleeping in was not comfortable, then it means they've attained that. I can't see that. I can see a robot saying, I'd rather have soft rubber. It can even squeeze it and say it's not soft enough. But that isn't real feelings. That's generated, or a role that they're playing. Just like a record says, good morning, welcome to Disneyland. There are many records at Disneyland. The record doesn't give a shit whether you're there or not. Every 20 minutes it says, welcome to Disneyland. Enjoy yourself and bring the kiddies next time. And the public, how nice. They assume lots of things. Robots assume nothing. They carry out a program. So far. Now, production machinery, if you change, say it just fills perfume bottles with nozzles, 500 bottles at a time. If you brought milk bottles up there and said, fill it with milk, you'd have to redesign the programming. So when the white substance passes a visual mechanism, the things absorb the milk and they eject it. The way that works is the nozzle goes into the bottle and it has another nozzle alongside of it, and it creates a vacuum. The one alongside of it's vacuum, the one here pours the milk in. As the milk fills up, it cuts the vacuum so no more milk flows. One tube sucks the air out of the bottle, and that brings milk into it. When it hits the tube that sucks the air out, it means it's full. So the machine doesn't say, I think the bottle's nearly full, and turns off a little in advance. No. There's no reflection in a robot. Like I said, I can make a robot that simulates reflection. If you whack it real hard, it can say, ouch, my knee. But that's impact that elicits that response. But the robot does not hurt. Do you understand that? No?
I just don't, where do you draw a line as what's robotic and what's organic? Because if you have an artificial heart, or, what's stopping us from putting in nerve endings
if you
and
have an
neurons
artificial heart that's stimulated by the nervous system, it beats fast when you have to climb stairs. And when you climb stairs with an artificial heart, it doesn't beat faster to give you more circulation and oxygen unless it's connected, unless it has responders in it to respond to more energy is required to climb up steps.
Say if we cut somebody...
It depends on the rig, but you can't make an inorganic heart, a mechanical heart that feels emotionally. Like if your pants drop, you cover yourself. In the islands, if a guy's jockstrap fell off, he doesn't cover himself. He doesn't feel embarrassment. People don't feel embarrassment if they're brought up nude. Embarrassment is a learned behavior. If a woman's top fell down, she'd go like that. But if she's brought up in a nudist colony, she wouldn't do that. So, do you still disagree with me?
No, I just, as
You
far
want to
as where we
understand
are...
more about it.
As far as where we are today,
That's what I'm talking about, where we are today.
how do we really know where we are today? Because the programmers, do you think we really know what the technology is capable of doing today? Do we have access to that information?
If you know how to check out human responses, otherwise you can't know. For example, what made me different? What made me think that robots can't do anything unless they're programmed to do so? Roboticists don't talk this way. They talk as though someday we'll be able to do almost anything. Well, that's a projection. It's crude. So what I did years ago is I made a robot that turned its head, but it never said yes, or never went through anything that I didn't wire in. If I took a model airplane and I wanted it to do a barrel roll, that means this. I had to work the ailerons at 150 feet. The robot has to have a gadget called air pressure manometer. It moves in as the air pressure changes. So at 100 feet, the ailerons would move. So it won't do a barrel roll near the ground. It'd break the wings off. But the robot, do you understand, when the ailerons move, it can do a barrel roll. If I wanted to do a loop, the elevators move. But it can't do a loop unless it's 200 feet off the ground, because it'll hit the ground on the half cycle of the loop. So I have to know what the range of that plane and its ailerons will do. If you meet a human being and say, "Are you an individual?" He says, "Yes, I am." Tell me how to stop wars with your individuality. He doesn't know. He can only recite like a robot, unless he's been in a condition to say, "I have to do a study on that. I may be able to come up with an idea." Where did he get that? In school. So even those questions, you have to know. If I met a man from Mars, like I said, I would say, "What do you think I ought to know?" I wouldn't talk to him and say, "Do you want to meet my wife or my kids?" That would have no meaning. Anything that can travel, like I always say, 100 million light years through space is not like us. And they don't require a pat on the shoulder and say, "You've traveled that great distance just to get here?" They'll say, "Yes, we have." They're not interested in that kind of conversation. Can you understand that? All right. So I'm talking to you about the world today and the values today. Can we make a machine with feelings? if we make it of organic material. If we can replicate life. Right now, there's a thing called colpoids, which was developed in Mexico about 60 years ago. Some Mexican took shellac, varnish, lacquer thinner, or mix it together, and a bubble formed, and it divided into two. Then the other one divided into two. They simulate organic occurrences, but they're not organic, they're not living. They don't move away from pain. All living systems that we know of, if you put a match near a moth or any other animal, it'll move away from it. If it doesn't, they don't exist. They get wiped out. There are many animals that did not feed their young. They just found food and ate it. They're gone. They can't reproduce. Do you understand that? So nature probably produced billions of experiments that didn't work, just like a lab or research. So when you meet another type creature, you always have to say, what have we here? And the answer is, I don't know, until you measure that creature's response to heat, cold, water. And if it has no mouth and no asshole, if it can convert the sun's rays into energy, it's a different system. And you're going to have to, how do you investigate a system that has no input? You know, you have to think of it. And if you can't do that, you can't analyze or predict. Science, theoretically, is the ability to predict the next most probable. When you understand science, you know how to go about and you know what to look for. Or you know that you don't have the equipment to look for it. I can't look up a germ's asshole with a microscope. I can only see the whole germ, but I can't get close enough unless I get another type microscope, super amplified. And if you gave it to the average person, they wouldn't know what they're looking at. So you'd have to know something about insects, something about what you want to know. If you just look at a man from another country, they're pretty much the same as us. So if you go like that, they know you want water or that. They know you want food. But if you meet a totally different creature from a different world, where their food comes from the sun, just energy, and you went like that, they wouldn't know what the hell you wanted. Unless they have a multiple orientation, which is possible but highly improbable. The orientation, as you get wiser and know more and learn more, you set aside the old. You don't look at a guy, he looks like a nice person. You don't have that value system. You say, of what use is the world to one another? Right now, it's me for myself. So it's of very little use to the majority, yes.
Would you expect that any advanced type of organisms, machine, whatever it might be, that could come that far to here, would you expect or not?
I wouldn't know why they came either. I have no idea. If they're that advanced, they can make anything they want to make. They don't need to come here.
But they wouldn't intervene to help us out?
No, I don't think they can send us out. Any more than you would turn to caterpillars and say, look, if you crawl on this tree, you'll just have to be picked off by birds. The caterpillar learns that, so there'll be billions of caterpillars and less birds. So do you like caterpillars more than birds? You must have an attitude about caterpillars. Or if you walk and say, I stepped on a caterpillar, and you can't sleep at night, you have a value system that's detrimental to your well-being and survival. If you step on a caterpillar accidentally, and you can't sleep at night, if you step on it deliberately, kids do that, because they have the power to do that. They can step on it, and they feel powerful. They step on it, a whole other thing. But when you think your associative system is real, that's when it becomes a problem. If it's not based on indoctrination, feelings that are superimposed over you, then it's the only thing you know.
What language would be adapted during social and emotional interactions for the first city?
It'd be too early at the first city. That's a transition. It won't work out too well. Go to school to learn the newest systems. It won't be any conventional language. It'll be the more efficient use of conventional language.
Can you discuss how much the planet's mortality rate would change in a resource-based economy, taking into consideration no war and crime, no poverty, no starvation?
We will maintain a population that coincides with the carrying capacity of the Earth's resources.
How to overcome the language barrier in the future?
Education.
First city, TVP city. Okay, so there is no sectarianism in social relations outside of learning and scientific research.
Well, people feel good if they're petted, and it depends on how much dependency you put in.
You cut out there. I don't know if you're trying to key up.
Okay. Did you get that last question?
Yeah, but that would have to do with education or information.
They're saying, for instance, in some universities, international universities, we can see groups because of language barriers.
I don't know that. It depends on how big the city is, how much is appropriated for the experiment. I can't answer that.
Jacques' statement, people are not entitled to their opinions, is often misunderstood or taken straight out of context. Can you briefly touch on this, that people are not entitled to their own opinions?
By their own opinions, you mean a judgment arrived at without experiment. If a judgment is arrived at without experiment, it is relatively invalid.
We often talk about people in this culture. It's always stressed that people should have the right to their own opinion. But we're really advocating that instead of that, because people can have all sorts of erroneous opinions without any research, without any backup. So we usually say people should have access to information rather than just opinions.
Yes, that's true.
Jacques, how do you define freedom in a resource-based economy?
I don't know what the word freedom means.
Does it have any different connotation in a resource-based economy? Would it be used?
No, the word freedom would never be used.
If Russia hosts the first Venus Project city, would Cuba and Venezuela be under consideration for the next city? We really don't know who or where the first city would be hosted. The people who are bringing us to Russia are interested in having it done. So they're working at it. They're trying to get people who might have the ability to do that. We would love to have the first city in Cuba and a city in Venezuela. We've always been interested in having a city in Venezuela.
Excuse me, Roxanne. In regards to the freedom question, I'd like to ask Jacques, would people have less, an equal amount of, or more freedom in a resource-based economy than they would in today's monetary system?
I don't know what freedom means, but they will have a wider range of inquiry and a wider range of knowledge in the future than they do today.
And wider range to goods and services and education and access to be able to do certain things that they want to do. You'd have to really define the term freedom. Nobody is free to do anything that they want.
That's true. I don't know what the word means.
In this culture, you're really as free as your purchasing power. It has no meaning. It's really
You
ridiculous.
can't eat your children if you're hungry. What do you mean by freedom?
There's an old saying that you can swing your arm as much as you want as long as you don't hit anybody else. Would you agree with that?
That's too insufficient to deal with anything real. It's subject to too many questions.
You'd have a wider range of variables, what you can do.
Yes.
You wouldn't be limited to your purchasing power. You'd have access to free education to pursue what you want in lines that would, lines that would benefit people, really. You'd be more conditioned to want to do that.
Less self-centered behavior and more social behavior. People will behave toward the well-being of others.
And they would understand by doing that, that your own lifestyle improves considerably. Your own well-being improves that way, much faster than it does than living to yourself today, thinking you can beat the other guy. Even if you accumulated millions of dollars, the standard of living and the range of what's possible for oneself would be much greater within the cooperative, resource-based economy.
Yeah, with respect to freedom, somebody who might ask this question with using the term freedom is just concerned, will they be restricted more in the future or have less restriction in the future? And it's a really simplistic type of question, because what Roxanne touched on and even Joe touched on something called free will. And that's a very complex question and thing to comprehend. But the word freedom, yes, the simple answer to that, you will have more general freedom than now.
Yes, that's true. When somebody asks that question, that'd be a good answer. Okay, you mentioned the creation of a new language that has physical reference. Would this be a single language, or would each specific discipline have its own language, i.e. language of mathematics, language of physics, language of electronics, etc.?
Yes, there'd be different languages. You're right.
Under the housing section of your website, it states you would use concrete in part to build them. Why would you use a material that produces such a large amount of CO2?
I said composite materials, mostly. Composite materials mean the elimination of the negative effects.
Would you build also out of concrete? Because you have written about that before.
Yes, but the concrete would be modified, so it wouldn't have the negative characteristics.
Jacques, do you have blueprints for large-scale behavioral systems? I am not talking about buildings and structures. I'm asking about physiological blueprints and particular ways of reinforcing behavior.
Yes.
Do you have blueprints for that?
Not blueprints, but the methods worked out.
Where would the scientists and technicians live? Inside the test city, demo city, outside the city?
They would live wherever they choose to, in the city, in floating domes, or on a hilltop. That would be up to the individual.
I think he's kind of asking about the first city. Where would the scientists live?
Surrounding the labs they work at.
And we see sometimes within the first city that there might be rotational inhabitants, like people would be rotating, maybe living out of the city for a period of time, and some people would be coming and going within the first city, people who want to work within it.
Yes, that's very close.
How can we be sure that nobody programs a robot to be destructive or harmful in any way? Sometimes people have hidden agendas.
Yeah, well, I would say that in the early training in school, you can detect those aberrations and correct them.
I have trouble understanding memory in humans. I know Skinner did not identify with the cognitive physiological point of view. Psychological point of view, where they see our brain as a type storage filing system. Could you, Jack, explain memory in humans?
Well, if we didn't remember that certain animals were found or certain types of fish were found near reefs, we couldn't learn to fish efficiently. So I would say that associative memory that reinforced the organism, either fed the organism or gave them materials that they sought. If you got materials remembering the shape of a rock that you got the material from, that would be extensional to you, to your survival. A memory that just remembers everything in the vicinity is not useful to man. You don't want to remember how large a bear's eyebrows are, because it's of no use to you immediately. So having a type of memory that reinforces you is more useful than a memory of everything that you see.
Jacques, do you agree that the physical reinforcer that comes from the environment is interpreted as emotions and a chemical substrates that make them?
I don't know what you mean by emotions. in chemical substrates.
Would physical reinforcers in the environment be interpreted as emotions? How do you interpret emotions?
Emotions, if you eat food and you feel good, that's emotional. If you want to be with another human being because you feel good about it, that's emotions. But emotions are not accurate. They don't tell you whether the person is good for you or not. Emotions are subjective.
Do you think that any environmental reinforcers are always interpreted as emotion? I don't
No.
exactly.
No. If you're reinforced by a city design because it makes people happier, better informed, and more reasonable to deal with, that's a useful emotion. But if you're emotional about a man because he's Polish and you're Polish, that's indoctrination.
Have you tried to identify the internal mechanisms of the reinforcement from the environment?
Yes, many of them are based on food. Many of the emotions are based on flattery, not necessarily based upon scientific scales of performance.
Why are people suspicious about technical elitism? My response to this is that how could elitism emerge when the education is available to everyone? Most of them that won't accept this alone. What would you say to them if somebody accused?
There's no elitism in the Venus Project. Either you have information in certain areas or you have limited information, but there's no elitism.
There's no advantage in it. There's
no advantage served by elitism.
And there's no reinforcement within the society for certain people to enable them to feel that way either.
Yes.
Jacques, what do you think about the New World Order that certain people prepare now in the secret? Do you think the New World Order is true?
No, New World Order is always done for advantages of particular groups. We don't have a world order for advantage groups. We have a world that's planned in accordance with the carrying capacity only.
Well, do you think that there is a New World Order, as they speak about it, a small group of people meeting in secret to controlling things?
There may be, but it doesn't matter. Any of those plans will fold because if it doesn't include the majority, they will be hurt eventually. The world order is to serve as an advantage point for particular individuals. We don't have a world order to serve any particular individual, but all people.
For the first city, how is the social relationship because of language barrier will block for this step? In actual university, scientists go naturally in their language group because easier to understand. Do you feel that because of the different languages, there will be natural barriers within universities or amongst people?
Only during the transition.
So what language and how will education be for the experimental city?
It will relate to the city, to the nature of the environment around them, and to the means for attaining a stable type of social operation or ever-growing social operation.
The microphones have been activated.
I've been watching the Venus Project for quite a while now. I agree with most of the overall goal, but I feel we need to achieve a target which is more approachable to the masses now, to start the process early. The overall goal is to get rid of money, but that is not going to happen anytime soon. So we need a goal to achieve now.
Well, we have many different goals that we're trying to achieve now. If you take a look at our website under Get Involved, there's a lot of things we would like to do. Take a look at that. We're working toward a major motion picture. We're working toward a first city. We would like to do many things, and any help you'd like to put in that direction would be extremely appreciated.
Yes.
Yeah, I am aware of what you're saying, but what I'm saying is I've asked in the past as well, would it not make more sense for the Venus Project to grow and money size, make money from a toxic system, show the masses what you could do with toxic money, putting it in the correct hands, and make further bases like in Venus Project Florida, different bases over the world to explain what's happening to the masses.
Yes, put out whatever information you can.
You're talking about doing small communities all over?
Yes, you need, the bigger picture is too far ahead, so we need a smaller goal that's more achievable. So for example, if I had the funds to give you £1 million, I would rather you spent money on different bases in different parts of the world to further educate people. Whereas if you put it into a film, you may get 500 million viewers, will watch it, will agree with it, but nothing will change. People need to buy into physical items in this world, because that's the world we live in.
We have always said we'd like to do a larger research center. If you have that funds, we'd be glad to put it toward a larger research center where more people could work directly with us, or we would help another group do that in another part of the country if they wanted to advocate the Venus Project and they understood what that was. We're all for it. We don't really rule anything out. We do rule out that we're not advocating small little hand-tooled communities advocating their own kind of direction. A lot of people come to us and say that we're doing a community and we're doing a democratic community, we're doing a consensus community, we're doing a hand-tooled community with low-tech housing and things like that, but they want our technology and they want to call it a resource-based economy and they want our help in that way, and we don't. It's kind of going backwards. It's not really going as far as we could go. So if anybody had funding where they wanted to do a larger research center, we're all for it. But the research center would have to demonstrate what the Venus Project is about.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but what I'm saying is I feel the Venus Project has to grow with money. It has to grow into a bigger monetary system now. But that's the reason the system allowed the Venus Project to go ahead, because it's too far ahead, it's not going to catch on quick enough. So that's the reason the system allow it as it is. If not, it would be taken down. And to beat the system at their own game, you need to make money in a toxic market, show the masses what toxic money can be converted into real money for the short-term goal to make the Venus Project grow.
Well, that's fine if you want to do that. People want to go out and make money and then put it toward this direction, that's good. We put all our money, all our life toward this direction, so we're not saying no to that at all.
But that's the only way I can see it going forward. The overall goal is to get no money, but that's not going to happen in the next 50 years. But I believe the Venus Project has to grow, has to do things to make more money. It has to get more people involved, because I do believe if you had the funds, a lot of people would be more than willing to do manual labour for free if they believed it wasn't going to a toxic system.
I agree with you.
We don't disagree with you, but don't put it all on us.
Yeah, I understand fully what you're saying. I just feel people need to aid it better. It needs to grow within money size.
We do have to work within this system, absolutely.
I don't think that the getting rid of the money is the main focus of the Venus Project. The main focus is providing abundance for everybody and making a much better world for everybody. And as a result of providing the abundance for everybody, money will become obsolete. So it's not the main goal to get rid of money. The main goal would be to provide abundance and a much higher standard of living for people. Do you see the difference?
No, you're right.
Absolutely, Sue.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. But for the masses to take it on, you need a short-term goal. A lot of these ideas are constructive, but they're not going to happen anytime soon. So a smaller goal that's more achievable, or setting up the foundations for the next 50 years, would be more of an achievement rather than just going and trying to help people for the long-term period, because it's not going to take on. So we need a short-term goal that's more achievable.
You do whatever you can. We agree.
Yeah, I just wanted to give in something, because generally people kind of link motivation to finances in general. Let's say there are different short-term and long-term goals. If you want to join up the TVP activism groups, I'm sure that you'll get more, like way more information in actually quite short period of time of what we do, because we have many projects that are both long-term and short-term. And it really depends on how you approach each country and each individual. And for example, you could do a long-term goal where you go and educate the kids for the next generation, 15, 17, 18-year-olds. And in 20 years, they would be the majority of the voters and the majority of the taxpayers. So from this perspective, there's other approaches. But yeah, I do believe that a lot of people actually do not put their effort only for money. Otherwise, we would not have volunteers in the world. Generally, people put a lot of effort because they see the point in the idea. And with especially with younger generations, it is easier to actually provide them this vision for the future because they see it now. 15, 17, 18-year-olds see this, especially in the countries where capitalism has really grown, see the shit that they live in. And you can actually present to them and say, well, let's build a better future together. And they're really enthusiastic. There's really a lot of projects that we're doing, and we would really like to have you on and kind of like show you what we do and stuff.
Yeah, cheers, man. I'll like to join that. I'm glad I got my questions put over. And I've got one final question. My friend has been watching the videos, and now I've ordered 2 books for it. One's going in the prison system, and one I'm keeping here. He understands exactly what the process is, and he's inside for a long period of time. Is there any particular department you would like for him to try and enforce to making prisoners open their mind up?
I didn't quite understand that question. Can you repeat that?
Right. Me and my friend have been watching this for quite a while. Now, my friend has been caught in a bit of hassle. He's ended up in the prison system for 3 years. Now, is there any particular direction you'd like for him to try and express to other people to make people realise what's actually going on?
Read the book, The Best That Money Can Buy.
Yes, learn as much as you can about this and start talking to others about it. Start talking to the people who are working within the Venus Project and learning what approaches they have been using and they have been successful with. And just learn as much as you can about it and try different ways to reach people.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. I was wondering, is there the film Future My Love, is that ever going to be coming out for purchase on DVD, or what's the story with that?
I don't know. That's our film. That's Maya Borg's film. I think right now they're going to be putting it out for film festivals, so it's not being sold right now. That's her interpretation of what she learned after coming here and doing a lot of interviews.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for asking my questions. Cheers.
Yes.
What direction do you propose to educate our children in our world today? I studied many different methodologies, and but not seems efficient to prepare our children for today's world and to work for something more RBA.
Not in a position to do that yet.
Now, how do you give them as much exposure as you can to science and technology?
Yes, that's the only way I know of.
Yeah.
Hello, Jacques and Roxanne. I would like to pass one question if I can.
Thanks.
Sure, Stan.
It seems that people interested in new directions, especially in the Venus Project, when they have some kind of instabilities in the economy or personal economical situation. Can you please comment why do you think that's the case? Why people, when they have financial security, they're not interested in new direction?
Because everybody's interested in stabilizing their own lives. They're interested in a world without war, poverty, unemployment, and all of the problems that are manifest in today's culture. They would like to learn how to undo many of those problems. And what the Venus Project's concerns are is the methods for accomplishing that.
Now he's saying, why do people look toward the Venus Project only when there's instability in their life or insecurity?
Because that's the only thing that motivates people, insecurity and instability.
Yes, when they're feeding themselves and they can still pay the mortgage and they can still pay the rent and they can still send their kids to school and pay for their cars, then they're really not interested in learning about new ideas when their needs are being taken care of. Even if the values they're learning and they're in debt all their life. Even if that's the case, that's considered the norm in this culture. And most people don't look for something else because they're not educated enough. They're really essentially indoctrinated in this culture. They're not really educated. So they don't understand the abuses or where it's coming from. They don't understand why they behave the way they do and why other people behave the way they do. They're given these ridiculous notions of good and bad and right and wrong, and they're just not working hard enough or whatever it is to keep this system going and to keep people plugging along in the system. So when they get hit directly, then they want their needs met. They want something to take care of their needs. They're still saying, what's in it for me? They don't have a collective or cooperative kind of attitude shift, but they want their needs taken care of. So it's then when those people keep looking around.
Thank you very much. This is a clear answer. And another question. In this lecture, Jacques says that on particular islands, men, when they nursing babies, they can start produce milk. Can he please elaborate on that and on mechanism which work there?
When we heard this recently, Joe looked it up on the internet, and you can find it there. So we don't remember which island it was. Do you remember, Joe?
Nah.
Yeah, I don't know, but take a look on the internet. You'll find that information. So we're going to say goodbye for now, and we really appreciate everybody tuning in.
Yes, this is so. And keep up the good work.
Yes, thanks everyone for all the help you're doing, and we'll talk to you next week.